Welcome back to another video. So today I'm going to be discussing CrowdStrike's Q2 2025 financial results. I'm also going to be discussing my previous video where I predicted where the stock may go, support, resistance, and we're also going to take a look at what happened after the cyber outage that took place a few weeks ago and the ramifications which CrowdStrike does get to in their earnings. So let's get into it. So if we're looking at the main highlights, revenue was 963.9 million, which represents a 32% increase year over year. Their subscription business represents a 33% increase, which came in at 918 million for the quarter. That's a great number. The subscription business, as CrowdStrike is a cybersecurity company, is their main bread and butter. So that number increasing year over year at a steady pace is great. CrowdStrike is one of the few companies that since its IPO, it's only been a few years, but since it's come onto the market, it's consistently beat the streets expectations. So that's something great and why investors love it. So continuing, if you look at the net income, which is an important aspect of any business, how much are you actually keeping after you pay all of your bills, employees, things like that? CrowdStrike represented 47 million compared to 8.5 million in the second quarter of 2024. That's tremendous growth. Net income increasing that large is amazing. CrowdStrike is a young company in terms of it being on the market, so it does still have a lot of room to grow. Also, if we take a look at the cash flow, they generated 326 million compared to 244.8 million in the second quarter. So their free cash flow came in at 272 million compared to 188.7 million in the second quarter of fiscal 2024. So all across the board, CrowdStrike continues to beat on its numbers. Margins are growing at a respectable pace. The business is continuing to grow, but they also did mention a bit of what took place after the cyber attack that happened when they were given their forward guidance. So they did mention right here that CrowdStrike's revenue guidance for the fiscal 2025 year includes an estimate of 30 million subscription revenue impact, meaning that they expect 30 millions each quarter to come off of their subscription revenue, which I just mentioned right here, 918 million, because they're going to be paying some sort of penalties, fees to companies, whatever it may be. They're going to be taking 30 million a hit per quarter for the remainder of the year. That is a significant hit, but to be honest, when you're making close to a billion in revenue, 30 million is a very small amount. I don't think it's going to affect the stock too much as long as they continue to beat expectations and continue to fire on all cylinders. I think this is a blip, but let's take a look at the stock and see how it's reacted so far. So right now we're looking at the 1 year chart on CrowdStrike. So today it closed at 288.54. So in my previous video, when I did it, I was right here. I mentioned that this base right here, which was being built, I did think was a bullish momentum for it to continue up higher. But there was an issue with the Japanese yen trade. I'm not sure if you may remember towards the end of July, start of August, where the S&P did fall apart. I also did mention in my video, if CrowdStrike does end up falling, this 200 level was in play. I did mention in my other video, I'll link it in the bio, that this was a strong support level for the stock. You could continuously see it always bounce here. And I said if it does fall, it will bounce off this 200 level. So I was correct. It hit this 200 level and went straight back up. Now, one thing as I did mention as well, when stocks fall as much as CrowdStrike did, these gaps within the stock, they usually are filled. So you see CrowdStrike hit a nice support level and continued all the way up. I did mention these green lines that you see as the areas of support and resistance that I'm looking for on CrowdStrike. This 288 line, it did hit and it was able to get over. But if you see this blue line, it essentially has rejected off the 200-day moving average. I'm going to get into that and explain why this is important. But over the next coming days, with the US government cutting interest rates, it is a positive thing that a lot of people are taking away from the market, which, yes, it is for tech stocks, especially which are risk assets. But in the short term, this will be a negative thing, which I will explain in another video, so keep an eye out for that. But in terms of CrowdStrike, if CrowdStrike could stay sideways over the next few days, I do think it can potentially test this 310. It got up to about 300 or 303 a few days ago, but I do think, in my honest opinion, this 310 is the cap on CrowdStrike for now. You want to keep in mind, when it hit the 200 mark, it has gone up essentially 51%. That's a huge run on a stock to make. but this is the way I see it. I think it does reject here, go sideways, and then it may continue down lower. I'm also going to show you what this 200-day moving average and why it's so important. This blue line, as I said, is that moving average. Let's take a look over CrowdStrike's time of it hitting the 200-day moving average and what happened. So if we look down here at the start, it cleared the 200-day moving average. It shot through. Okay, let's continue. Right here, it essentially got to it, but rejected and continued lower. Right here, it got to it, slightly went over, but rejected lower. Right here, it got through, but continued higher. So this 200-day moving average, this blue line, is essentially a significant resistance zone. If you want it to go higher, 302 needs to clear. As I've shown, if it hits it and goes down, you could expect CrowdStrike to go lower. If it hits it and breaks through convincingly, you could see the 340 being taken out. So that's something you want to keep in mind with CrowdStrike. Could it happen? We'll yet to see, but the 200-day moving average is important. One other thing I wanted to show you guys, what I do use on my own time sometimes, what I haven't spoken about, is the RSI, Relative Strength Index. So what that is that this essentially measures when a stock is oversold or overbought. And it uses two metrics to gauge that. When something is oversold, that essentially, relatively or generally speaking, is when this chart is under 30, and something that is overbought, meaning that it's too high, basically, is when it's over 70. Those are loose numbers, but that's generally what people use. So right now we're looking at a yearly RSI, or looking on the yearly time frame, I should say, on the stock. Right now, when it hit that 200-day moving average, as I said, which seems to be a strong resistance zone, it essentially got up to 70 zone and it's begun to come down. So if it does come back to, let's say, the middle of about 50, I do think that could take that stock back to that 280, 270 area. So that's something you want to keep in mind. But also, it's not something that's perfect. If you look right here, this would be considered something that is overbought. It essentially hit 90 on the RSI. If we look at the stock, it only came down less than 10%, and then it continued higher. But as the stock continued higher, if we look at the RSI, it was continuing lower, although the stock was going up. So it's not something that's perfect, but it generally is. If you look right here at this first time that it hit the 200, right here, it continued lower, and then it went back up. The stock went back up. It hit this area. You look on the RSI, it continued lower. It hit a bottom here in January of 2023, and then it continued higher. So if you follow it, sometimes it does match it, but generally speaking, it's a good gauge, but it's not perfect. Just a tool I wanted to show you to help you maybe become a better trader or investor. So thank you for watching the video. We're going to have to continue to keep an eye on CrowdStrike to see what its earnings show over the next few quarters. Are companies leaving it? This is important. CrowdStrike is a fundamental company and a leader in its space, but after that crowd outage, there is companies that could be asking questions. I believe in the stock. It's a generational company for the next 10 to 15 years, but as an investor, you have to stay open and never be closed-minded to anything. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you want me to review next in the comments.